You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. If you'd like to learn more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at beardedtheologians.com, where we have past podcasts, blogs, and a couple items for sale. So check us out, beardedtheologians.com. Thank you for listening, and enjoy this week's show. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
So this week on the Beardcast, we're going to dust off a classic. And this week in the lectionary, the fourth Sunday of Easter, is the Psalm 23 appears. And it's a kind of a good psalm in the midst of the season of pandemic that we're in, as churches are trying to discern and as people are trying to discern how to live out their lives in the midst of safe social distancing and all that stuff. And Zach, as you look at the psalm, what speaks to you in the season, and for those that may be looking for a sermon, what kind of some nuggets can you give for people today?
Sure. The thing about Psalm 23 is it's one we all know. The Lord is my shepherd. And like Matt said, it's today, but I think it fits. It fits every season of life, right? And I think that's why this psalm is so important and so heartfelt by a whole bunch of people, because it's that walk through this life with God. There's going to be green valleys or green pastures. There's going to be dark valleys. We're going to have these ups and downs in life. And this psalm is all about the reassurance that God is with us. God is walking this life with us through the ups, through the downs. We're going to feel all of these things as humans, and God's right there with us. And I think this psalm brings us so much comfort, especially in the down times of life and the darker times of life and in times of uncertainty like today. But we also brings us a whole lot of hope and joy, knowing that there's something else, that there's something more for us than this moment right now. And so when I think about Psalm 23, I think about all of those things. So often the psalm is used at the end of life through funerals and memorials and things like that, which is completely appropriate. But I also think it brings us great hope here and now as we continue living, trying to figure out what in the world is going on and what the world's going to be like tomorrow, after this pandemic, through this pandemic, 10 years down the road, as we look back, how we see God walking with us through this now. This psalm points to that. And there's something very beautiful and comforting about that, and something very hopeful. And for me, just inspiring to continue to move forward and run towards what God is calling us to run towards in these moments.
I remember the first funeral I did, and I read this and was just overcome with what it means, and remembering that the line in verse 4, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no danger because you are with me, your rod and your staff, they protect me. And that's that stuff, like in the midst of those seasons that we're going in, those dark times or whatever they may be for different people, we can lean into that and know that God is with us. And that promise, that's like the ultimate promise, that God is always with us. And that's, to me, comforting. But then I think about that ladder, and the ladder, the ladderness of the psalm. You set a table for me, right in front of my enemies. That God calls us all to the table, and I think of that line, that we eat from the table, and we all eat from the table, and we all have a space to sit and to be together. And there's some comfort in that, and to know that even in the midst of struggles, that we're all in this together. When I think of this psalm, I always think of that, just that comfort that's there. It's kind of like a warm blanket. Like when we hear it at a funeral, it's kind of the warm blanket, like, all right, so now like it's here and it feels good. And we hear that, we hear it, and This is one of the few scriptures I actually still use, either the NRSV or the King James, just because it's comfortable to people and they know that one. I love the way that the Common English translated it, and it really does. Like you lean into it a little more, but I is for that comfort and what people know. Like that's where, like that's the one. Those are like the few times I actually do lean into those because that's what the ones that people know.
Right. I was going to say the same thing. I don't often read scripture for any purpose out of the King James because it's hard to read. But this is one of those scriptures I always, always, always go back to the King James on. Most impactful verse. Psalm 23 is only 6 verses long, and yet it carries so much weight and hope. But it's that last one. It's verse 6. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. I mean, you talk about that warm blanket of comfort in the midst of grief, hope in the midst of pandemic. That's what that verse 6 just does it for me. Everything that we feel as humans just is loaded into those first 5 verses, the ups and the downs, and then that surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. That just settles it for me, everything that is welling up within me, good, bad, right, and wrong, with a sense of peace and grace and mercy. And it just, whenever I read that verse, whenever I talk about this psalm, whether it's in sermon, whether it just I'm sitting at home and it comes to mind, it's that verse that calms my heart, that calms my soul, reminds me to rest, and reminds me that God is with us. And as far as the entirety of scripture is concerned, there's a reason why these 6 verses rest heavy on people's hearts, hang on people's walls, are highlighted in Bibles that are known by heart. They're powerful, powerful words.
Well, and I find it funny. I mean, not funny, but I think it's interesting. You have the King James version, "The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want." And then, like, I love the way the Common English translates this. Like, I'd almost want to read like a mashup of the Common English and the King James, because there's, I mean, but that's one of the kind of the beauties of like interpretation is. But I love the way that the Common English translates that verse, and that the Lord is my shepherd; I lack nothing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I've always found that powerful. I think that to me is one of those lines that. When we think about when we're with the shepherd, we really don't have to worry about anything. And that's kind of one of those things that we can lean into and realize that when we're in the midst of being with Jesus, that we really don't have to worry about anything at all. And that's powerful.
It is powerful. And that's one of the things that I love about the I am sayings of Jesus, or anytime Jesus talks about, I am the good shepherd. This is what I'm here to do. I'm here to shepherd my flock. Whether it holds any weight or not, to me, it points back to this right here. The Lord is my shepherd. Jesus is going, here I am. I am the shepherd. Here is what I'm called to do. And there's so much hope in that, at least for me, when I tie those pieces together.
Yeah, and so I think a good thing to think about as we go through this season of, that we're in with a pandemic, and, if you're preaching on Sunday and you need something to preach on, this would be a really good psalm to lean into for your people. And you may have already preached it, but I think it's something that you can look at and check into of, what are some things the shepherd provides for us. And you can, I mean, there's plenty of material available for that, and leaning into that. And so, I think it's a good thing to think about, how's God, how do you see God being with you even in the midst of where we're at right now?
Right. Leaning into the vulnerability of the green pastures, the still waters, and those darkest valleys. I think for us as pastors and as people, whether we're preaching or just reading it, taking it in, whatever it is, leaning into the vulnerability of those words is huge.
So I want to thank you for listening. Encourage you to like our Facebook page, give us 5 stars on iTunes or wherever you listen to our podcast. But we encourage you to look at all of our great content at beardedtheologians.com. You can even pick up some Mother's Day gifts. Remember that's coming up, or if you've got a birthday or anything, there's some really good gifts for people to pick up. And so I encourage you to do that. So for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out. Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out.